Welcome to Faith Works Live. Here's your host, Rebecca Haynie.
Oh, goodness, I'm so glad you're here. What an awesome day. I'm thrilled that you've chosen to join us for this slice of eternity here on Faith Works Live. And if you're new around here, welcome to the party. We love to rock and roll around here. I just joked that we have a mandatory hokey pokey at halftime. But that's mom humor. You've heard of dad jokes. I have mom humor in spades. And it's not my fault, really. I talk with teenagers and toddlers and not much in between until we get to this moment on the microphone. We're going to do some Caucus Talk, sitting here from the First in the Nation caucus state, and I am so blessed to be in Iowa. We get a front row seat to the presidential process. Iowans take this type of thing very seriously. We care about electing good leaders. We care about asking the tough questions, and we expect a few things. We expect authenticity. We remember when a candidate says one thing and then goes to another coffee shop or to another bakery and does breakfast and then says another. You can't try to pull the wool over an Iowan's eyes. We know, we remember. And we then pass that discernment on to you. So it's a unique opportunity that we have to look at who's going to be the leader of the free world. It's been a very different sort of year, a different sort of cycle from my experience with such things. I am privileged in the studio to be joined by someone who has even more experience than I do. He knows, as they say, how the sausage is made, and yet he can still smile. He's an expert at this. Political consultant, mastermind extraordinaire, Ryan Rhodes is our guest. Ryan, I'm so glad you're here.
Well, I'm so glad I could be here. So thank you for having me and for that kind introduction.
You lend an air of credibility to all my pontification because you actually know what you're talking about. How long have you been involved in politics and specifically working in Iowa?
It actually started back in college in 2008 when I ran for office, kind of out of the blue, out of nowhere, and then
that's always fun.
Yeah, then kind of jumped out and then got pulled back in with the Tea Party when I had to do something, and then just being active, learned how to make it a career and actually really, really get people elected, because what I found back then was there was so much activism, so much you want to do, but if you're going to spend that much time and really devote your life to it and kind of be called to it, then you got to figure out a way to pay the bills at some point.
That's true. And that's harder than you might think. I would say to do so with principle.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of money floating around in politics.
Plenty of money floating around.
You could get paid to do a lot of things in politics, but it's to do so to make a difference. And I know that's where you are too. That's where your heart is.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's each cycle kind of gets different and different because everything has gotten so kind of convoluted. When you have so many different candidates, you get deep into the records, then you get behind the scenes, and sometimes you don't know until you already are behind the scenes the differences as well. So it is something that I hope more and more people can get in and actually take that stand and push, because we don't have a whole lot longer with the country if we don't really step up and fix this. But it's so hard for the everyday person to necessarily get their head fully around that, and that doesn't mean they're not intelligent or not paying attention. It just means that there's so much in that sausage that's getting made that really you need good people back there to really keep them honest, because even some of the good ones that go out there have the best of intentions, and if they don't have the right people behind them, it's so much easier to fold up.
Well, and that's exactly what I was thinking of when you were saying that, Ryan. I can think of faces and names of people who I love, who I know had good hearts and had the right intentions, and then they get into a system and they're unaware. They get in over their head right away, and then somebody, kind of like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which is my all-time favorite movie, at least in my top 5, and this wonderful ideologue gets in and thinks, we can just obey the Constitution and the Declaration, and, we could follow Thomas Jefferson, and everything's going to be great. And then the career politicians come in and put their arms around you and come here, walk with me, son. This is the way things are done around here. And before you know it, you're voting like them, you're sounding like them, you're taking the same checks, the same donors that they are, you're having all the same meetings, and you're singing off the same songbook. And that's why I think it's so difficult to see any real change in areas that matter, not only in Washington, but at the state and local levels as well. You have this sort of entrenched power system, and it can be hard for even principled people to come in and take a stand because most of them don't know what they're getting into.
Oh, completely agreed. And I think the next phase of this fight is going to be harder because unlike what we sometimes don't want to admit, money is the mother's milk of politics a lot. And so you are going to need that. And the left has so much money, such unlimited funds. And then they have the government funds they're also using to do this. So we are going to need that, but we are going to, I think in a lot of ways the fight's changing. We're going to have some strange bedfellows on things. And that doesn't mean you compromise a principle. It means like we have people like Naomi Wolf that all of a sudden joined for COVID, or Harry Potter, the J.R. Tolkien, Harry Potter that all of a sudden joins us in trying to stop transing the kids. So they're weird, very, very strange bedfellows, but we're in a new era where reality and truth, fundamental truth, is at stake. So I do think there are going to be a lot of people that you're going to have to pull them onto the side and maybe work with them on certain things without setting aside certain other principles, because they're not going to agree with us on everything. But it also means that you have to realize that just because they're coming over doesn't mean you have to go over there. They're making the choice to join you in that fight. And you may make the choice in some other thing to join them, but somebody at some point is going to either compromise or join on the issue and fight a different day. And too often it's been our people who continually compromise, and we're backed against a wall right now. If we don't protect the next generation, there won't really be something to compromise on the next time, because once you give that up, there's not really anything left. And so I think that fundamental fight changes the entire nature of politics, on top of the fact that they've been they're going after their political enemies in a way we've never seen. So the next step in day and age, I think, is going to be even more difficult to how do you maintain principle? How do you go forward, make a difference, and also be able to stay involved? But I think it's going to be. I really don't think there's any other way except God to do that, because it's going to take an actual commitment to Him to continue going back and asking. And when you slip up or when you make a mistake, you go back and say, "I'm sorry, I wasn't listening to you, or I didn't hear from you," and now jump back. Because if we had all these just wonderful people, and if all of our churches were standing on the up and up, we wouldn't be here discussing gender and these other things. That wouldn't be the major debate thing, which was left off the debate stage.
Yes, and that annoyed me so much. I mean, they did bring up abortion a little bit, but I was very frustrated that one of the major cultural issues that we're facing of our time, they were silent on it. Completely. And I'm like, come on, Fox. I guess that speaks volumes in its own way.
Well, it does. It's not something they want to touch. I think it's one of those things that got Tucker tossed. I don't think most of those candidates wanted to do it, really get into it on the stage anyway. Now, I do think it was a loss for them to not bring it into the conversation, because it is relevant in so many different things. The education, you can't talk education. You can't talk about any of that stuff without getting into what they're teaching our kids, how they're manipulating kids behind their back. I mean, you just name it. You could pivot almost any one of those issues to it, which is why overall in that debate, I think there were some people did well. But I do think there were missed opportunities, because they're letting the debate people decide what the stage is and have a nice, even keeled debate where they get to control the issues. And those aren't necessarily the issues people are talking about.
What, you mean you're not absolutely enthralled waiting for Chris Christie's answer on UFOs and aliens? That wasn't, you weren't waiting with bated breath to figure out what his policy on UFOs was going to be?
I do love hearing from Matt Walsh on UFOs. But
that is one area where he's got some off-the-wall takes.
I'm still convinced this is the longest troll ever.
This is it?
I think at some point maybe it's the longest troll ever, or maybe it's just his little corner of the world that he goes,
right?
this one I need to be weird on.
They really are out there. The truth is out there, man.
But no, I mean, now in hindsight, I'm not interested in hearing anything Chris Christie has to say.
I know.
I really, of all the people on the debate stage, there's people like Asa that I'm like, I don't care. I just don't. I think he's weak, because if you're not stopping the children's mutilation in Arkansas, where are you going to do it?
What good are you?
But Chris Christie is, I always joked that if I ever got to the point of being totally unemployed on a presidential and get down to that wire, I'm just going to go troll Chris Christie every day.
All day long. It's worth it. It's my donation to the good of humanity.
Absolutely.
Oh, man. And I don't know if everyone on the show has the background that I do with Chris Christie, but he's not really welcome on this show. He's just the one candidate where I'm like, I don't see a path for him at all in this race, but I didn't, the last time he ran anyway. He is willing to throw the punches, right? Mm-hmm. Metaphorically, he's willing to attack. And that's where I see what he thinks his path forward is just going after Trump. And he's just the attack dog on Trump. He's willing to do what Trump kind of prevented him and frustrated his prior attempts from doing, because Trump is just way better at it.
Yeah.
And he's got that same attitude, but he doesn't have the believability and he doesn't have the credibility. But I think he thinks his path forward is just trying to knock Trump. And then I don't know if he honestly believes he could get to the White House, but I think it's personal for him.
I think it's absolutely personal. I think it's even more dangerous to Trump this time because I think Chris Christie actually thought he was serious last time. While most of us in Iowa clearly didn't, based on his polling numbers, he did. And so this time, I don't even think it's about seriousness. He's not coming to Iowa at all. He's just going to New Hampshire, and he's just there to try to blow Trump up there. And you know what? Honestly, if I'm Trump, I look at him and go, weren't my worst management decisions in the history of this presidency yours? Weren't they your fault? But that would require somebody actually coming back and being like, there was a mistake. But I think everybody knows Christopher Wray was a mistake, and that's another related to debate. I thought that was another missed opportunity from candidates. When they can look, you can get yourself a wedge where you both touch Trump, but you're not sticking a knife in, because you can sit there and say, hey, Chris Christie, wasn't it Christopher Wray? Wasn't it these personnel decisions that all stabbed me in the back? There were all problems on COVID and every other thing. Yeah. Weren't these all you? Weren't you prepping me for the debate that everybody had problems with Joe Biden? Weren't these your problems? And so if they were to say that while also giving a little deference, I think there's a way to slide in there, but those are another missed opportunities on the debate stage. But it did get pretty hot and heavy in there for a little while.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the debate, because you were, if not front row, at least in the wings.
I was right low on the wings.
You should have waved. We would have waved back. Ryan Rhodes is our exceptional guest today. We're picking his political brain, learning more about how he sees the Iowa caucuses playing out, what's different this year, because I do think it is different, and what impact, if any, you think that this debate had, what issues you believe are going to be the biggest for voters moving forward, and the elephant that wasn't in the room, which is Donald J. Trump, and his convoluted legal schedule that's coming up, to say the least. Man, this is one for the history books. I know that. No matter how this plays out, this is going to be a whole chapter in the history books that I can't wait to tell my grandkids I was there. I'm not sure what it's going to look like or what language we'll be speaking, but I will be able to tell my grandkids. Oh man, you gotta laugh while Rome burns. Anyway, Ron Carlson, it's time to take a break. He's given me that high signal. So thank you for listening, and stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. We'll have more with Ryan Rhodes on Iowa Caucus Talk when we return. This is Faith Works Live. When a woman faces an unplanned pregnancy, every possible emotion goes through her head. Where can she go for help and for hope? She can go to InnerVisions. Here in our metro, we have 2 healthcare clinics where she will find hope and help. From free pregnancy testing and STD testing to free ultrasounds, InnerVisions serves women and men with STDs who find themselves in vulnerable situations. They're completely free of charge because of generous donations from folks like you. And their medical clinics help their patients get all the information that they deserve that empowers them to make life-affirming decisions. That's what they do at InnerVisions Healthcare Clinics right here in Des Moines. Learn more at innervisionshealthcare.org. That's innervisionshealthcare.org. And you can call 24 hours a day at 515-440-CARE. That's 515-440-2273. In today's world, security has never been more vital. And at FaithWorks Live, we're proud to partner with VeriGuard Security. It's a professional physical security service, and they're really raising the bar in security and private investigations. Whether you need a team of professional officers to protect what you have worked hard to build, or their mobile security units for multiple properties or large locations, from business or corporate properties to your home or neighborhood. Perhaps you've got an event coming up. They secure quality security coverage for events large and small, because it's about peace of mind and protecting you, your family, your team, and your property. Settle for nothing less than the best when it comes to your security. You shouldn't have to compromise. When it comes to security, you can trust VeriGuard. Contact them today at verigard.us. That's VARA guard.us. For security service, you can trust VeriGuard. So glad you're here. This is FaithWorks Live. We're doing an Iowa Caucus Talk. I like to say it's a raucous caucus around here. Ryan Reynolds is our special guest, and he is a political mastermind from the ground in Iowa with many years of experience. You look like you're about to correct my assessment of your skills every time.
No, but if I looked as good as Ryan Reynolds.
Oh, sorry. Ryan Rhodes.
I know.
My goodness. Okay, well, around here, you could be like Ryan, our version of Iowa's version of Ryan Reynolds. There you go. Man, it's a good thing that, I'm paying for this microphone. Otherwise, they wouldn't let me back in. But according to Ronald Reagan, I am paying for this microphone. Ryan Rhodes, my friend, a colleague, gentleman and a scholar, and a political consultant. He knows his way around a debate stage. He was at the GOP debate in Milwaukee. There were a lot of varying opinions I saw. Most of them had Vivek Ramaswamy kind of as the winner of the night. And I think he was certainly the most combative. I was surprised to see in the final breakdown that actually Mike Pence got an awful lot of speaking time. He technically had the most speaking time because he's not the one that I remember from the debate stage. I remember Vivek the most. But that's probably because everyone seemed to turn and say, hey, he's the guy. He's the whack-a-mole that's sticking his head up the most. So he got probably attacked the most, which means he got rebuttal time, which was a good strategy for him. He had the most bold lines. I think he had was taking a lot of the contrarian stands on many issues, including foreign policy. I'm not sure if that's winning him on those, or winning people on those issues, or how many people agree with him, but he does sound very different than everybody else on the stage. So I think that's why most people are looking at him and why he rose in the polls as a result of his debate performance. What did you think about Vivek's performance?
Well, yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I mean, if you're on the stage, if everybody's coming at you, I was really, really shocked that DeSantis, in most cases, got a pretty free pass from getting attacked by any candidate.
True.
He did well as well, but Vivek getting attacked that much kind of elevates him, because you usually don't attack what's kind of down unless you're Trump going, I need to pivot and ask why these guys are on the stage. But he was in the middle. They're kind of, it seems like on the stage without Trump, everyone's kind of trying to be, who is us versus Ron? And they ended up, I think, kind of elevating that it is Vivek and Ron clear second, clear next runners up. And so I think that's probably helped him. He's going to have to see if he can, parlay that into some long-term polling. But I was looking at something on, obviously, New York Times polling and whatnot.
Consider the source.
Consider the source. But it wasn't so much the polling bump as I think it was something like 40% more people had heard his name. All of a sudden. And that's a pretty drastic move from where you're at. So now he went, he's almost doubled his name ID, essentially, meaning that people had heard of him, people were talking about him, they're in that news source. And now I think with that first debate, even though he had memorable lines, most people forgot what those were already. And it's the next step that's going to decide where he's going to be. Okay. And I think the same, what Ron did was different. What Ron did was hold people up and say, I can be on the debate stage, because there was a lot of people that thought, hey, if it's him versus somebody, they're going to tear him up. And he's not going to look like he should be on the stage. And that's just based on a lot of the stumbles and things that have come out of the gate with the campaign that they've openly acknowledged and said they fixed. So I think he definitely looked very adult on the stage. He did well. Certainly a few things, any debate, there's things to improve on. But we'll see in the next debate. And I don't think you're going to see 8 people up there. I think they're going to knock off at least 3 or 4 of those people. Probably Chris Christie will stay up, but I think Burgum and Asa probably fall off to some extent. Maybe leave the other 6 at least for the next debate, and then you got Suarez already dropping out because he didn't make the stage. Perry Johnson and Larry Elder are still threatening lawsuits. So it was.
I heard that
the whole night was interesting before the night started.
Yes, my man Larry Elder. He sounds like he might have a case. Not a legal expert around here, but it sounded like the rules were maybe not as hard and fast as they should have been. Again, I don't have any little birdies inside the RNC or anything, but it is probably not a coincidence that even though more people in the conservative right have heard of Larry Elder or Perry Johnson, more than Doug Burgum, for example, I find it interesting that he wound up on the stage and those other names that you mentioned did not. I'll just say, very interesting.
Very interesting. Well, he definitely ponied up a boatload of cash to get on there.
That is true. And he's a former governor, so, RNC likes that. I think you're exactly right, Ryan. And I think this goes to just a different feeling that we have about this cycle. It feels like there's a truncated amount of time. And here in Iowa, we like to be nice. We like to give everybody a chance. We like to survey our options, much like a field. We like to watch the field grow, the field of corn, the field of candidates. But at this time, it feels like we need to have our decisions made. And maybe that's because I would say at least a third, although this is more anecdotal, so you can tell me if you think I'm way off, but I say at least a third of the voting populace has already sided with Trump, and there's nothing that they can be, they're not going to be swayed. It is ride or die for Donald Trump. And so maybe that just feels like there's less play. And so there's not really room for a whole bunch of other candidates to rise to the top to compete.
Yeah, I think that's completely the case. And I would say at this point going in, what you're looking at is probably 35% floor for Trump.
Okay.
And that's if they can knock out more percentage. Right now, if the caucus were held, it might be 42. Just because somebody has to make that decision and the other people haven't sold them. But if somebody's going to get in there and they're going to pick it off, the real thing too is it's going to come to a math game. There's 100% of the vote, and unless candidates start to drop off, Suarez is out. You're going to see some of these other 1%ers and whatnot drop out. But if Larry Elder goes, let's say 2%. You get Chris Christie 3-4%. You get Tim Scott, Nikki Haley Mike Pence, Nikki Haley even 5. You start chunking down numbers. A couple people are definitely going to get into double digits. Then you have Trump versus 2. And I think, even with a coalescing there, to get over 35% and actually do that and then not lose the rest amongst disparate candidates, it's going to be hard. In a heads-up battle, it's very different, but I don't think we're ever going to get a heads-up battle. And so, these campaigns are going to have to step up, because while it feels like the caucus almost just kicked off with the family leader and with other things, that's really late for normal. By this point, we already had the straw poll before. We've already had other things. As Ben Carson's state director before, we'd already had our 99 county chairs out, and we'd filled almost all of our precincts. And now, until the kind of national implosion in our camp, we had that and we lost and had to rebuild again. But I'm not seeing those things out of a lot of candidates. It's almost like the operational side just got started late.
I think that's fascinating. Do you think it's because Trump has just crowded everybody else out of the field, or there was this assumption that he had? Has he locked up the good people, for example? Have they already signed onto the Trump train? Or is there movement that you're seeing? Because that's my big question. Obviously, Donald Trump has a major advantage in this race. I don't know. other than Teddy Roosevelt. I don't know that we've seen this former president who's lost one election and then come back to run again to be the party's nominee. I think that's kind of historic no matter what. And not to mention all of the drama surrounding Donald Trump specifically. But that's a major advantage to then try to compete with that. My question has always been, how many people are willing to say, okay, that was then and this is now, not to mention issue disagreements they may have or concerns about electability. I wonder how big a number that represents in Iowa, the people who have been for Donald Trump and now are deciding to go a different direction.
I mean, when you get that breakdown, I mean, I think Donald Trump could get some back depending on who wanes and who goes. I mean, Ron DeSantis is in a position where he has a chunk of Trump's voters that may go back to him as opposed to most of these other candidates. So if DeSantis starts, going down and doesn't make the case, then they go over to him. Then another candidate would have to jump up and try to make their case. Clearly, Vivek's trying to make his case for the Trump voter. I mean, that was very obvious on the stage that he's trying to make his place as a defender of the former president. But the other thing is, if you're going to get out there, you can be on the ground a lot, but at the same time, you want to hit the news, you want to hit the local news, you want to hit all this stuff. And that big, big elephant in the room every 2 seconds is all over the news because of the indictment, because everything else. At the caucuses, we're probably going to be talking about the Super Tuesday trial date of the former president.
Which is crazy.
Crazy.
He's got a trial literally at this point, as we're recording this, he's literally got one scheduled on the night of the Iowa caucuses, and then another one on Super Tuesday. I mean, that could not be more perfectly illustrative of political prosecution if you tried. Hello.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't know. Everybody knows that I have some substantial disagreements with Donald Trump, but still, I mean, you got to feel for the guy. This is it's absolutely rigged. To use one of it's rigged. The whole thing is rigged. That doesn't mean that I think he's got this in the bag just out of a reaction to that. But I do think that's going to be, how could it not impact the minds of all the voters as well? So feels like a whole other question. We're facing a crisis on so many levels as a country, and the fact that this is playing out on the front page in living color in real time, this is political prosecution. And that motivates, I think, many Republicans to say, well, I've got to rally on the Trump train. He's being persecuted over here, and so we're going to defend him. And we've seen his mugshot, I think, was the most viewed photo that we've seen, like, in the history of Google.
Yeah.
They had raised millions of dollars based on his mugshot alone. They're selling T-shirts. They're out there with the koozies. It's fascinating to watch, man.
Yeah, I mean, they raised something like $8 million in 48 hours or something like that. It's crazy, but I think that you come down on two sides. There's that set of people who needs to be convinced that to go off of him, somebody else is going to be the one who can win. That they're not going to let this go. And it's a weird dance because if you say, no, I'm going to stand with the former president, yes, I want to beat him and be the nominee, but I'm going to stand with him and I'm going to pardon him and all that all these people want to hear. Yeah. Okay. Then you also all of a sudden take that, whether it's the Rubio or the other kind of type of crowd. I think there's a lot that Tim Scott is in there somewhat. Okay. Maybe Tim Scott, it's probably dribbled around the Pences and others too a little bit, but they go, no, I don't want to hear that. So it's almost like you have two GOP camps that are totally opposite on Donald Trump, and then you have the just completely, I'm not going anywhere. Yeah. Donald Trump is God, King, Emperor, and can do no wrong.
The once and future emperor of the land. He's riding bareback on a horse with that American eagle coming up over his shoulder and the machine gun in the other hand. That's the cover of that history book. The grandkids are going to say, what? But by then we're speaking Mandarin, so it's okay. Yeah. Now, the crazy thing to me is that we're talking about the caucuses. We're talking about personality and Donald Trump. We're not really talking about issues. And that's the weirdest thing to me about all of this is because I'm used to, over the last several cycles that I've been involved and active, Iowans care about issues. We care about principles. That's why most of us have left our fields and have, gone on to go meet and shake hands and take selfies with all of these politicians in the first place. But we're not really talking about principles right now. I think that is going on in the background. People care about the future of the country, but the narrative that's out there is all about, well, really it's all about Trump this, Trump that. It's personality driven. It's entertainment really more than our governance, which I think is for the worse. But I don't want to lose sight of the serious issues that we're facing. I just kind of wonder if that hasn't taken a backseat in a lot of people's minds, if there isn't this personality stand-in. We're looking for a fighter. We're looking for a warrior. We're looking for someone that understands the danger that we face, the existential crises, multiple, that we have right now. We've got our back against the wall in America. This might be, and I've heard, every election is the most important election of my lifetime. I've heard that forever ad nauseum. And yet this one might actually be the case. I don't know what else the left can push and what else the left can do that could destroy the country even faster. I just don't know what future, if we don't stand up and stop and say, no, you will go no further. You shall not pass. Yes, conservatives. Yeah. We need a Gandalf moment. And someone that, can really say that and mean it and take the stands that, other conservatives have been too scared and too cowardly to take. We don't have that much more time. I'm feeling that among people. And I think there's a lot of folks that are rallying to Trump because they see that fighting spirit in him. I don't know that his governance equivalent was what his rhetoric promised. And that's my biggest concern, is that he's so tangled up in what's going on legally the last year of his presidential term. But I think people would be willing to forgive if he'd be willing to admit there were mistakes made. And I think people are looking to personality as a stand-in for those principles, to say, at least he stands for me and he's willing to fight for me. Some warrior that's willing to stand up and say no more. That's the fire that I think, in particular, you mentioned Ron DeSantis. There are people that would be interested in Ron, but they're still holding out. They're not quite committed because they're looking for the fire. And what he's done in Florida, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what he's done in Florida is a major, he's had win after win. He's had those fights. He's stood toe-to-toe with the most powerful voices, with the corporations like Disney that are, trying to trans the kids in a big way. And getting all the government bennies in order to do it. And he's said no. And that's been a fight everyone else was afraid to take on. And he's done it. He stood for freedom against the COVID lockdowns. He's done he's had major victories. And people are looking for some of that in his personality. They're looking for that fire to come out. And I think they're just waiting. They're waiting for the person standing before them to be as impressive as his victories on his resume.
Well, it's kind of like you sit there, and when David goes up against Goliath and you're sitting there and they're like, who are you? But then he goes out and actually, takes the stone and does it anyway. He's going to have to go. And after that, we never really heard David was small again. So at some point, he's going to have to pick up that mantle if he's going to want to win, because when you're singing songs about somebody, when you're doing that, there is a cult of personality. The other thing that he's up against is this: unless it's dealt with in the media constantly, but conservative media too. Unless DeSantis can deliver enough interest to deliver enough clicks, you're not getting all of the conservative podcasters, the conservative memers, the people who do this on a daily basis. And I get it. There's echo chambers around there, but those echo chambers spread. The news goes to Twitter, maybe a small percent, but the news gets their stories from Twitter, and they get their stories from these other people. So it's magnified, even if they don't cite Twitter as what they're magnifying. And so he's going to have to do something to grow beyond, I'm in a governor's mansion in Florida. And I think undoubtedly he has done hands down the best job, at least right up next to Kim. Kim has done here. I think she's done a phenomenal job. So they've done a great job in the country, but how are they going to go on and take the left? And I think it's going to be more than just the lock her up and go away. And I think, somebody has to know you're serious about doing that, because it's not an easy thing to say, but you're going to have to lock some people up if you get in again. If you want to win this race, you are going to have to acknowledge that there are political people who, yes, they are the political enemies, and we're not locking them up because they're political enemies, but they've committed very, very serious crimes. We have people who have done serious abuses of power.
Yeah.
There is no denying that Joe Biden, he used fake names to communicate with his son. He was on the Sun talking about a lot of the weathers and everything else. His son, he said he was the smartest guy he knew. Well, does the smartest guy you know talk about weather all day? No. So when those people know,
Yeah.
we can't go in there and go, okay, well, we won this, let's put it away. They're going to have to know that when they're coming at us, we're going back at them, and we're going to have some real substance to it.
Right.
And until you get to that point and we start reining in the actual power of lawfare from both sides,
Yeah.
we're just going to stand there with either we're going to have a knife and they're going to have a bazooka, or we're both going to stand there, popping each other, and it's going to be a problem. And that's just not a nation survival thing that can happen.
No, it's not. Well, you're talking about civil war,
Yeah.
essentially. And this is a realm, it's like this is one level above where we are actually at each other's throat, literally at each other's throats. Nobody wants to see that. And yet it seems like more and more this is where it's devolving, where nobody trusts the mechanisms of society. Nobody trusts the institutions that have been put in place in order to guarantee that even if we vehemently disagree with each other, at least we can share a country. It seems like that has unraveled, or is in the process of unraveling. And I pray against that, but at the same time, I pray that the truth will be revealed. And that sometimes it takes that, excuse me, on a spiritual level, sometimes it takes that that dismantling. God will cut away the dead wood. And I think he's doing that in our country. I think so much has been revealed, even just in the last 3 years, as horribly mortified and sad and humiliated as I was to see what our nation became, the freedoms that we gave up, the usurpation, the authoritarianism that we allowed. I think it was so revealing. I think it was revealing for the body of Christ, revealing for who we are as Christians, in our churches, in our communities. It revealed what was going on in our schools in a blatant way, what we were allowing in our communities, who really had say, what our idols were. And I think this election cycle could be about that. I would love it. That's honestly my prayer. I would love to see if that could be revealed, if that could be the spark of repentance that could beget the revival that we've been praying for all of these years. But I don't know, right now, after the debate and after seeing Trump's mugshot, like my hopes aren't real high right now. Well, political Pollyanna. Sorry, guys, I'm over here in the corner.
Well, right now, and I do think there will be you'll see some of it in politics. I do think there's people coming. I don't think they're here yet, in all honesty. And I think all this election is, yes, right now it's probably the most important election of our lifetimes, but so is going to be the next one, unfortunately. And I know it's been said for years, but I mean, at this point, there's a fundamental, when we look at the national policy on the national stage, and I told this to a journalist, I said, you don't understand. I actually told this to the former VP as well. I said, you don't understand why people are upset about money going to Ukraine.
I don't think he does.
And
Definitely.
You don't understand why they can't get behind the Russia stuff. One, they've heard Russia for years, okay? Two, Republicans in general do not see, a lot, do not see Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin any differently. The president of our United States is not seen as having any ounce of more moral authority than Vladimir Putin, or any more disgusting. They just know that Vladimir Putin can kill people.
Yeah.
And Joe Biden is just putting him in jail. And if we don't do something in a few years, they'll be doing the same thing. And that's the problem, is they don't see that equivalency. And they see Ukraine as, there were Romneys, there were Bushes. I'm not sure about Bush, but there were multiple people from multiple parties, okay? They were on this board. The Bidens were on the board, okay? This is just a trade-off of send money over there, pay the rich men north of Richmond. And that's what they see this as.
Yeah.
That's why they can't get behind it. They don't see this as a clash, as the 1980s Ronald Reagan clash of communism. They see this as a complete sellout of the country, and they don't even know who the enemy is because they see it in their own White House.
Right. And we don't have the good guys anymore.
No.
We don't feel like we are the good, like our people are standing for the right things anymore. There's that moral quandary that we find ourselves in, like who are we anymore? And that's where I think whether or not he has a path to victory, Vivek has had at least some great lines. He's trying to do that vision casting. He's talking about truth. He's talking about our identity crisis as a nation, that we're searching basically for the soul of America. He's pulling from a lot of those Reagan-esque kinds of clarion themes that people want to hear. And I do think it's going to take somebody that is, whether or not it's him, we need to have that vision. We're looking, we're searching for hope at the same time as we need someone who can correctly diagnose and identify the problem and say, our country is worth fighting for. And I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to fight. To the last ounce of what I have. I'm going to give it all for this nation because I care, because this is what matters, because our future depends on this. And it's not about fighting within one another. It's about identifying the enemies at the gate, so to speak, and saying, we need to stand together. As you said, there may be some strange bedfellows. I'm thinking right now of just on the thought sphere. I never thought I would see Russell Brand, Bill Maher, Jordan Peterson, Tucker Carlson, all on the same stage. Like, that is a weird fantasy team. It's just one weird moment. But again, it'll be in the history book. That's what it's going to take, is people being willing to stand up for the transcendent truth. Although we're going to disagree sometimes about how it works out, I think we have to be able to stand up, and otherwise we're not going to survive. And many Americans are feeling that existential crisis. Whether or not there will be someone that is willing to stand up with moral clarity and speak to that overarching vision about the path for the future. In lieu of that, I think people will go up with whoever is willing to hit the hardest, whoever is willing to punch back. Because they're going to use that tenacity as a stand-in for courage.
Yeah, and I think that's completely accurate. And you touched on something there that's really interesting, because those very people, the strange bedfellows, right? Not one of those, none of those people are seen as a master of faith or anything else.
Right.
But they're people we have to fight with because we haven't had faith leaders to fight with. Because they have all been convinced that politics is a dirty thing. And sure, there was a pro-life issue, okay? But at some point, actual leaders, actual men of God are going to have to stand up and say, no, it's okay to say this is a Christian country. It's okay to declare that, because if it's not, it will be the other thing.
Yeah.
You don't get
nature abhors the vacuum.
You don't get And so if they don't step up and fix the country, then the Russell Brand, the Joe Rogan ideology, and Jordan Peterson, very smart guys, very all interesting in their own way. But you don't save a nation by directing them to work out more or have some existential thought.
Yeah.
You're going to save a nation by actually declaring and giving yourself back to God, because there's nothing. That's what we were founded on, and there's nothing else that can replace that. But I do think there's that desperate want for truth. And if they're searching for those things and they're finding it there, the only reason they're not finding it ours is because we're not championing it better. We're not giving them something to believe in. We're not there on behalf of the young men and the other people, because we've decided politics is icky.
Right. Oh, man, that's convicting. I can't leave it there, Ryan. We're going to take a break. We're going to look for the hope. We're going to look for the silver lining in all of this. Now, what do we think about the future? We'll go into that in just a little bit. We can give final thoughts on where we are, sum up the situation as it stands, and what you think will be the deciding factors moving forward in the Iowa caucuses and in the presidential race. Sound good?
Sounds good. Yep.
Ryan Rhodes is our excellent guest. Thanks for tuning in to Faith Works Live. We'll have more on the other side. There's no better time than now to stand for life, and you can stand with Iowa's original pro-life organization, Pulse for Life. They're the longest-standing nonprofit pro-life organization in Iowa, and they're dedicated to informing, educating, and inspiring a new generation to value the sanctity of all human life, from fertilization until natural death. They serve at the State House, they educate in classrooms, at events. They proudly serve on the coalition of pro-life leaders. They are on the front lines of the battle battle against this throwaway culture of death that we see all around us, and we are winning ground. Hearts and minds are changing, and the pro-life movement is continuing to grow. And you can be a part of the exciting things that are happening right here in our own backyard at pulseforlife.org and get your finger on the pro-life pulse. Sign up for their newsletter, find ways that you can make a difference, and how you can change hearts and minds with their pro-life apologetics course, pulseforlife.org. You know how much we love Anonymous beef at the Haynie house. It is delicious. It's wonderful quality. It's naturally raised with no steroids, antibiotics, and they just do what they do so well. High quality beef at the Anonymous farm. But did you know you can actually see where your beef comes from? You can visit Anonymous Farm. The fine folks, Dave and Mary Lynn, are the most hospitable folks I may have ever met. They'll let you feed a bottle calf and then meet the cows at Anonymous Farm. And opening soon is a special treat, Mulberry Cottage, for a stay at the Anonymous Farm. It's a family-oriented getaway, and they'll let you hike the trails out there. You can forage or bird watch or just enjoy the beautiful sunset from their porch. I'm very excited to check it out myself, and they'll even let you do a cookout with Anonymous beef. Order your beef or your next vacation at anonymousbeef.com. That's OHNEMUS beef.com. We're in the home stretch here on FaithWorks Live, and I am just having a blast with my friend Ryan Rhodes, who is a political, I keep calling you political mastermind. As consultant, you're like, what does it say on your business card? So I get it right.
It says president. I have my own company.
Okay.
I do a lot of grassroots still. I took the Tea Party and kind of figured out how to organize people and then pay them to go, whether door to door, digital, just general consulting, consultant with different candidates. A lot of issue-based things, PACs. We've done. You just name it. I've worked all over the country on that stuff, and Iowa as well.
Yeah, which means he's the guy with the finger on the pulse of what it takes to win in Iowa, and then of course, what to be best positioned for the national races. Now, there's going back to the debate because you were there, front and center, and there were some names that I think we haven't mentioned yet, but I don't mean to assume that they're irrelevant. I mean, just because they're not in a rap battle with Eminem right now, which apparently Vivek Ramaswamy is, which is so funny. That's just like the gasp of dying relevance from a once cool rapper, and he's out sending letters from his lawyers because Vivek was rapping on time at the Iowa State Fair.
I guess he's going to have to stop all those karaoke machines, too.
I guess so, man. Although you mentioned Ben Carson throwback, and I was like, nobody's talking about the fact that this is not the first time that Lose Yourself was sung by a presidential candidate on stage. If nobody else remembers that, I will. Ben Carson came out in his announcement speech, I think it was. Wasn't it?
They had musicians perform Eminem.
There was a choir. There was a full stage choir, and they were singing in harmony, and it was "Lose Yourself" by Eminem, and I lost myself. I was like, "This is a moment I will always remember."
I was actually not there because I was preparing for his 3-day swing in Iowa the next day, and so we had 3 days and 16 stops or 18 stops in those 3 days. So I did not get to go to Detroit, but I did watch that. And
that was history in the making. No one else remembers that.
It looked very Kanye if you start fast forwarding.
It's so, man, those were the good old days. So anyway, rap battles notwithstanding, what are some other names? I know we're coming up on.
Well, I think jumping in, Nikki Haley obviously showed herself on the foreign policy. Agree or disagree on that? Her fight with Vivek and DeSantis and a couple others. She showed that she had more chops and was a little more polished than just the brashness, I think, of Chris Christie or even Pence just whining about the 80s foreign policy, right?
Yeah.
Nikki did a better job actually laying it out. If you're going to make the argument that people are disagreeing with, she did a better job making the argument, which I think is why she saw a bump. Tim Scott got lost in there, but I don't think he's lost in the Iowa caucuses, and this is why. He's the only person in the entire field that speaks evangelicalese.
Very true. He's really speaking the language. He is the one that is actively trying to capture the evangelical, the values vote. He's out talking about how our rights are inherent. They come from God. He's doing commercials in churches about how we are, founded on Christian principles, which usually plays very well here.
And so what I think is this is what's going to be interesting, because obviously the other person we haven't talked about is Bob. And Bob is clearly between Kim and our governor and Bob, I think those are clearly the two most influential people in our state in all
So for
caucuses.
national audience, that's Bob Vanderplat.
Bob Vanderplat,
of the family leader.
Bob Vanderplat's of the family leader. They are the most influential people for how somebody's going to decide to vote. There was a recent poll in how much a vote for Kim would bounce somebody and what it would do.
Interesting.
A Kim vote would bounce a lot. Like, she could change the caucuses.
Really? So Kim Reynolds' endorsement means a lot.
Kim Reynolds' endorsement means a lot. Now, obviously, it depends on whether those people just assume they're going to endorse their candidate, and so there's a little bit there too. But her endorsement means a lot, and Bob's endorsement means a lot because it comes with an organization. Now, the Bob one too is tough because he comes with that evangelical organization. And if Scott makes a foothold before that, right, you still have a lot of church leaders who they don't want to look at a fellow Christian and go, I bailed on you. So if he's able to solidify that double digits, 10, 11%, that creates a real problem for getting over that threshold for somebody like a DeSantis or a Vivek or anybody else if there's going to be a coalescing to get there.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the word of the day, really, when it comes to the Iowa caucuses is coalesce. I think if you've got, like we've already talked about, Trump's got a very high floor. I also think he has a very low ceiling. So there's that factor. And that means that there's really going to have to be like two candidates, maybe one ideally. But then really I'm looking at the top three in Iowa, and I don't think that anybody else coming out of that is going to be able to really survive. I mean, they'll hold out.
Well, I think everybody likes to think that we hold ourselves superior to everybody. We don't. I think we are better at vetting candidates because of how much we care and how personal we get on that. But we are not. We don't believe we're picking presidents. We do vet the field, and I do think there are 3 tickets out of Iowa. The problem being is that I don't know that there is. If you're not out in this realm, if you don't beat Trump or if you don't notch it there, I don't see you going through southern states because that's kind of like his southern wall on these things. And if they don't see him beat in some other place where people get to see all these people all the time, I don't think you make that case down the road.
Right. And I think just as we're wrapping up, there are some things that Iowans want to see. I think they want to see authenticity. That's always the case. I think they want to see fire. They want to see a fight, and they want to see people who are willing to confront the other side. That may be why Vivek is getting a lot of attention, a lot of audiences, because he's actually going on these podcasts. He's going on the media. He is out doing the 99 counties thing. Now, I believe DeSantis is as well. He and Casey have been making their rounds and sending surrogates too. Right now is a really difficult time. And prayers for Florida. And so he's got to govern as well, which is a challenge because he's got to be governor in his state, and that's his first responsibility, really. So that's going to make it difficult to campaign. But people are looking for the fire.
Absolutely.
So if you concur?
I do concur.
All right, you're the expert. So I have to go to you, Ryan.
Yep.
Ryan, it has been a blast,
It's been a
my
blast.
friend.
Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome anytime.
All right.
I know you've got 99 counties, and then you've got plane tickets here, plane tickets there, and a Tesla on a charging station somewhere. That's an inside joke. Oh, man. So you're welcome back anytime. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
This has been Raucous Caucus Talk. I'm so glad you're here for it. Pass this on to a friend so that they can get not only the inside scoop on what's going on in Iowa, but also the fire for the vision of the future of America. I do believe that if God's people who are called by his name will humble themselves and pray, will repent and seek his face, that he will hear from heaven, just like he's promised. He will hear from heaven and he will heal our land. He will turn toward us again. He will guide us again. There has never Here's the promise to end on. There has never been someone who has truly sought God that did not find him. That is a promise that you can take to the bank every single time. So if you seek him while he may be found, he will draw near to you. That's true for people. That's true for churches. That's true for your family. That's true for our nation as well. And that's why we do what we do. We have a mission, so let's be about it. And that mission is to love God, to serve people, and to live free. This is FaithWorks Live.